I kind of told you why I started suing companies, because I felt like they had done something wrong. And so I really didn't like the fact that they were treating me a certain kind of way, and they felt like what they were doing was justified. And so where I draw the line is when you cross the line, and I know or I feel that you crossed the line, then it becomes a different situation. Now, why I started the YouTube channel is a totally different reason. You see, all this of suing these companies, I had gotten a little cocky and I felt like, I didn't have to settle for the little few $1,000s they were offering me, five, six, seven, eight, 10,000. They were offering me money. They just wouldn't offer me enough that justified in my mind what I had done as a pro se litigant. You got to understand, I've been practicing law, so when you read cases and you see and you understand the law, the nuances of the law, you feel like you're not taking care of me the way I should be taken care of. And so I went from asking for a few dollars to I started asking for money. There's a difference. So now I'm asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm asking for millions of dollars. The reality is, in some cases, I wasn't going to get it. Not because I didn't have a claim, but because they were working against me. When I say they, it's expected that the lawyers are going to work hard to keep me from winning the case. That's expected. But where I had to draw the line and where it started making me feel a certain kind of way is when the judges were helping the lawyers to beat me. Yeah, I said what I said. The judges were helping the lawyers to beat me. Now, you might say, well, why would they do that? I never understood it, but the reason, I had wrote to some newspapers, and I sent out requests trying to get people, the newspapers and the TV stations. I'm trying to get, some traction, but nobody would seem to touch it. So I said, well, the only other way that you would ever have a chance to do something if you rang the bell, so to speak, on YouTube. So that's how Justice with Ken came. But in the midst of me creating Justice with Ken, I always have to tell the story that I was listening to Dochi on YouTube. I was doing a video and Dochi, I like anxiety. And so how Old Head Smitty came was purely by accident, because I was doing so many different things on my channel. I had music. Well, first I just had law. And then I was into the gold digger videos. Not that I believed them, but I was into the gold digger. I just couldn't believe every video he did. He's probably done 1,000 videos, if not more. And every video starts the same way. She looks good. I think I'm going to say something to her. And I was fascinated by the whole concept of the video. But, I diverted. Let me reel it back in. So then the music, the gold digger at one point was really pulling people into me. But it wasn't doing that, it was doing enough to get me getting closer to monetization. So I do want everyone to understand I am monetized. And I've never had a viral video that was a hit. I've only had, you have to say, well, how, it took me exactly 8 months to get monetized. And it was all strictly on no viral hits. The closest thing that I had to hits was probably Caribbean Queen and Lou Rawls' You'll Never Find. They were, I think, between Lou Rawls was close to 20,000 but it was a consortium where one, two, three, four, five, all five videos together made that many views. And Caribbean Queen, I I don't know what made that song so special. And then my latest hit is I Treated You Bad, or the Michael Jackson. When I sometimes I can't hit a note worth for nothing. So those are my closest songs that helped me get monetized. But now let me jump right back into this. So the reason that I started the channel was because I wanted to have other people see how they were treating me. So, if you you make enough noise and you ring the bell loud enough, people will stop and look and see what's going on. So that's why I started Justice with Ken. But like I said, Old Head Smitty was one of those things it started out as Justice with Ken, and then it just kind of evolved into more, So I wanted to be what they call a one-stop shop. And then me being a one-stop shop, I wanted to be able to have music, funny, some stories about me, then some legal stuff. So when you came here, you could get literally anything that you wanted. And bam, you got it. But as I was doing it, I had so many things telling me, you shouldn't post more than once a day. And I was posting multiple times a day. Once I figured out how I could schedule things, so then I start posting at this time, that time, this time, that time. And so it did help me get a bigger following. And so I'd like to tell you that I'm at 10,000. I'm nowhere near that. I'm closer to 3,800 subscribers, and it's growing. I probably grow about 100 to 150 subscribers a month, which ain't bad for a small channel. But the nice thing about me is that my audience is loyal to me, and I try to be loyal to my audience. And so again, let me stay on track, because I can get off and I can start talking. The reason I created this website was that I wanted to make notice that they weren't treating me fairly. But then I learned another key thing, and that is that you don't draft motions based on emotions. You draft motions based on violations. That's how you win cases. I've seen cases where the guy would turn, he submitted something to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is a hard one. It's a hard cookie to get into. And this guy, he started out in prison, and he was a pro se, and he helped somebody else get their case overturned. And I was thinking to myself, what does he do different? And so then I found out that being unattached emotionally is how you win your cases. Because there are times that the judges forget, and they figure because you don't have an attorney that you shouldn't win. They can read, they can see everything that you see, but they will just say, I know Joe, I know John. But, in the same instance, if it was two attorneys, they couldn't take that kind of favoritism towards one or the other, because it would, it creates a different sort of chaos. And that isn't something I want to do. But because it's a person who is not as affluent in the law, they figure that they can say and do anything. So there are some things I know immediately where I can argue and say, well, that's not right. And I can say why. I might even be able to quote a case or two. And, I've even had a couple of instances where judges have asked me, what are you reading by? And I'll say, well, my brief that I prepared for my argument. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they go ahead and they bend the rules and they try to shape and mold and construct the rules so that it applies to them. And they say, dismiss. And they think I'm supposed to say, oh, okay. They dismissed it. And that's it. But that isn't always it, because there's been many instances where I have challenged their decision. Over the last year or two, I've gotten so much better. And I've learned that emotions, having your emotions, everyone makes mistakes. It's your opportunity and your duty to capitalize on their mistakes. And so I appreciate you stopping by. I still don't know if I really answered the question, but the reason I broke off and I kept Old Head Smitty was because everyone was telling me that you've got too much going on. You just need to have one lane and then have the legal lane. And I was like, and so that's how the moniker came up of Old Head Smitty. People were calling me Unc anyway. I laugh at this all the time. Some people call me grandpa. I'd be a little offended. What do you mean you calling me grandpa? Then I think to myself, I said, wow, you know what? You are 60. And you are someone's grandpa. So what they're doing isn't really wrong. I guess it's a sign of endearment or a sign of, they like me. But, I guess once you reach 35, 40 and people start calling you Aunt, Auntie, you be like, Auntie, what you mean? The reality is, it is what it is. We're getting older. Every day we're getting older. And it's not going to stop until the day we don't get any older and we leave the earth. So that's why I started Old Head Smitty, because I had to separate the two. But then now that I've separated the two, because I don't just have one topic that you could look at my site and say, oh yeah, because I have 3 or 4 topics. I have music, and the gospel is one of my strongest genres where people comment and make comments. And then, then I have the country and the rock and the soul and the R&B. But then, I have life stories. I talk about being a vegan. And then I slide the legal in because I really wanted this, I wanted to get enough of an audience to create. I hope that I get to 10,000. And once I hit 10,000, I want to do 20,000. Right now, you have to forgive me because some of my videos are not the best. Period. Cinematically, how I shoot my videos is I just shoot the videos and then you can literally see me like, is he reading from the... So, what can you say? Hey? But I have the best intention in mind. I want my audience to know that I do this from my heart. Everything I do it from my heart. And so the reason, if somebody ever asks me, why do I sue some companies, or I sue this, or I sue that, and I say, I sue them because they violated my rights. They're like, oh, well, you could have let that go. And I always want people to understand one thing. You know, when Rosa Parks was sitting on that bus and the guy, a white guy, walked up to her and told her he wanted to hit her seat, and she said no, you know, she could have got up. So all I'm saying is, if it's something that you wouldn't want your daughter or your son or your grandson or even your great grandson to go through, every now and then you have to put your foot down and stand up for what you believe. And that's what I do each and every day. I stand up for what I believe. You know, sometimes it's a tough battle. But the one thing I've learned, the more legally concise that you make your argument, the better opportunity that you'll have to win. Unk out. Peace.